Before building your Trex deck, given our products carry a 25-year and 50-year warranty, you need to build a high-quality subframe to ensure your deck will last the test of time. The Trex International Installation Guide references joist layouts and gives some advice on how to build a subframe depending on the design aspects of your project. This guide is available in hard copies from any Trex stockist or online at uk.trex.com. When building a subframe, you have two options. Low-level decks will normally be built with a flush beam system. This is where the outside ledger boards are the same height as the internal joists. This system would require more joists and noggins to keep the frame level and ensure that the frame is firm and secure. On higher decks, you can use a drop beam system. This allows you to fit a run of beams first. You can then lay out the joists on top of the beams at 90 degrees to the beam. This helps to spread the load and is a much stronger method of installation. If you need advice on how far you can span your posts or beams, then just refer to the joist span tables that you can find online. The subframe is the foundation of your deck, so it is advisable to overspec this rather than underspec it. You really want the deck to be solid rather than have any movement or bounce in it. When connecting your beams or joists to the post, it is best practice to cut a shoulder out of the post to mount the timber onto. This ensures that the weight of the beam is being transferred down through the post into the post footing, rather than the load being secured on the fasteners. When digging a hole for the posts, it is recommended to dig down to a depth of around 600 millimeters. It is then advisable to pour some concrete or post fix into the hole. Allow that to harden before setting your post on top of this. This gives a firm base and protects the bottom of the post. Once you are happy with the position of the post, you can then backfill the rest of the hole with post fix and allow that to set and secure the post. When cutting your timber, the saw cut will break the envelope treatment, so it is vital that you retreat all of your cut ends with an end coat preservative. This helps to reseal all cut ends and ensure that you have re-established the envelope treatment. This must be done on every timber cut end that you produce. Commonly, most builders merchants stock use Class 2 treated timber. This is only treated for indoor use. When you cut the end of this timber, you can see the envelope only really covers the outer layer all the way around the timber. The piece on top is actually treated to use Class 4. This is treated for outdoor use. As you can see, all of the sapwood has full penetration of the treatment solution. The pale bit in the inside is actually the heartwood, which will not take treatment solution in. So this is a much better treated solution for outdoor use. When securing the beams to the posts, it's a good idea to find the straightest timbers to use as your beams. This is the first level of your deck and will set the foundation for your subframe. So take your time to eye the timber to select the straightest timber from your pack. When building your timber subframe, you need to build a structure that's going to last the lifetime of the decking product that you're using. So Trex carries a 25 and a 50-year warranty, so we need to be sure that the frame is built to the standard to last that long. So that's why we choose to work with structurally rated fixings. These fixings have been supplied kindly by our friends at Carpenter's Mate. We've chosen to use them on these projects because we know that they guarantee the lifetime of this fixing for the lifetime of the project. There's no other fixings on the market that do that here in the UK, so that's why we choose to work with them. They're a great brand. They have a really good range of fasteners, as you can see from the examples we've used on this project. We have what's known as a hex head. These are great for when you're securing your noggins and your timbers, so you're screwing these through the rim joist into the timber. They also have a flat head option, so on the outside of the frame where we're going to be putting a fascia board against this, sometimes that head can get in the way and raise the fascia off of the deck, which obviously we don't want. So these wafer head or flat head options that they do help really drive those in and keep this outside surface nice and flush. Once the beam is cut to length, we can then attach them to the posts using the structural rated fasteners, and then repeat this process for the rest of the posts. Check the beams are level as we fit them. Now we have our beams set, we can start to lay out our joists. At this stage, it's important to think about the design of the decking. Are you incorporating any features like breaker boards or picture frames? Are you adding any railing to the project? All of these may require some extra timber to be added to the framing, and this could potentially affect the joist layout. Remember, the Trex installation guide will offer you some help and guidance on this. Wherever a board starts and finishes, then the joist centre is required to be at a maximum spacing of 250mm to the centre of the joist. Everything inside of that 250mm joist centre for a Trex project is required to be at a maximum spaces of 400mm on centre for a residential project, or if you're on a commercial project, this is reduced to 300mm. These are maximum spacings. You can reduce them if you wish, but you can never exceed them. On this project, we have a picture frame around the deck and a railing around the outside. So when we lay out the joist, we need to ensure that we have a solid foundation to take the picture frame and the correct blocking for mounting the posts into, and either add a ladder system or some extra flat blocking to ensure you have adequate timber to fix this board into. The next step is to ensure that the decking joists are secured into the beams. This can be done by pre-drilling at an angle, so not to split your timber joist, then using a structural rated fixing to secure the joist to the beam. Noggins are required between joists to ensure the frame is firm and helps to stop the joist from being able to twist or move laterally. When fitting noggins, ensure they're cut straight, all cut ends are retreated, then when fitting them, ensure that they are square and secured with an adequate number of structural rated fasteners. On this project, we have a step to bring us up from ground level to the deck surface. The Trex installation guide shows how to lay out for both box stairs and stairs stringers. As this is a low-level deck, we're going to use the box step method. We have constructed our box step with our joist centres as we are using the Trex Enhance range for our stair tread with a lineage picture frame. We need to lay out the joist centres at a maximum of 275 on centre as highlighted in the Trex installation guide. Now we've completed our decking frame, we're going to show you how you can go about protecting the joist and beams of your deck from rot and decay using the Trex Protect deck flashing tape. Any wood that is constantly exposed to moisture will eventually rot, even pressure treated wood. The key to protecting your deck frame from wood rot and decay is to use a high quality deck flashing tape when building your deck. It provides a thin, waterproof barrier protecting the wood from rain, snow and other elements. However, not all deck flashing tapes are made the same. Typically, there are two types, acrylic and butyl. Acrylic tape is less durable than butyl tape. Although it is sticky, acrylic tape cannot seal as well as the butyl tape and does not provide any flow to maintain its watertight seal over time. Also, it tends to break down when repeatedly exposed to sunlight. So as you can see, this is acrylic tape. It is very sticky, but when you roll the fastener over it, there's nothing there, there's no flow. So when that screw's coming through from above, if this was stuck to the joist and you're screwing through the deck board through that tape, there is no flow on the back of this tape to seal around that fastener. This is Trex butyl back tape. When you peel the backing layer back, you can see the butyl on the back of the tape. Now this is sticky and it does flow across the back of the joist. So now as you roll the fastener across it, you can see that butyl really sticking and getting into the grooves and the crevices around the fastener. So as you screw down through the deck board from above, the compression that's created by trapping the deck board to the subframe will help to squeeze the flow of that all the way around the fixing point. It comes in three sizes, 50mm for your joists, 100mm for any beams. These both come in a 20m roll. There is also a wider 280mm for your rim joists, stairs and flat block surfaces. This comes in a 15m roll. This product is really easy to apply to your subframe. We'll start by covering the deck joists. First, make sure the wood is clean and dry. Then remove the backing of the joist tape and apply it directly onto the joist. The tape is self-adhesive and will seal to the wood as soon as you apply it. Run your hand over the tape and firmly press it onto the wood. Now you can cut the tape with a utility knife and follow the same procedure on the rest of the joists and any beams and then any rim joists. Trex tape has the added advantage of being slip resistant, so it is safe to walk across the top of your deck frame once it has been applied. Trex Protect tape is well worth the small amount of cost it adds to your project. With a 25-year warranty, you can have peace of mind knowing that your deck substructure will last as long as the deck board it supports. So when marking out for our fascia, we need to make sure that the holes to secure our fascia are 25mm from the edge and the end of the board, and spaced no more than 400 on centre. We've brought these in slightly narrower because we don't want to hit the fixings behind these joists, but you need to space them at least every 400 or in between that. And it's 2 across the width of each board. We're then going to take our counterbore tool, and this cuts a hole through the board, cutting away for the screw shank, and then a little counterbore collet so the head of the fastener can sit flush with the surface of the deck board. We simply take that, drill it through the board. You'll see the holes in this tool allow for all that swarf to come back out and away from the fixing hole. And we just repeat that process for every hole down the board. Using your set square, just take off any of the burrs that are on the back of the board. This will stop your board from lifting off the subframe. Now we're ready to install this onto the face of the deck. The idea behind these screws is they have a bit more of a pan head washer with no thread at the top. So the thread bites into the timber and it allows the composite fascia to sit on this threadless part of the shank of the screw. So it just allows for that little bit of expansion and contraction. Composite will naturally grow and expand in its length, so it allows for that movement without compromising it and breaking screw heads off. Once they're screwed in, you can see they're colour matched to match the board of the fascia. So every fascia board that we sell has a colour match screw to match the board itself. So another option when installing fascia is we can actually, using a different counterbore tool, the fascia counterbore tool for our plug system, we can sink the screw deeper into this fascia board. Still the same type of screw, it still has the threadless shank at the top, but it pins it to the fascia board and as I say, the hole is preset deeper, which allows us to put these colour matched plugs in afterwards to take away the visibility of the screw. It gives a much more premium finish for our premium product. The counterbore tool works in the same way. You drill through the board. As you can see, it just sits the hole deeper into the surface. So now when we drop the screw in, it leaves a hole for the plug to go in. Now using the enhanced fascia screw, pop that into the hole, similar to the colour match screws that we've already seen. Slide those into the right depth, as you see, pulls it in nice and square. So now we have our fascia board screwed in using our enhanced fascia screws. We can take the colour match plugs, find the one that matches the hole best. With this handy collated strip, you can just locate it into the hole, tap it to break it off, and then finish it off nicely, which takes away the visibility of the screw. So the Trex fascia board is 14mm by 184, so 14mm thick, 184mm wide. Composite products do kind of expand, contract and move. So as you can see, just me dummying up this mitre here, it's really difficult to get that mitre looking really, really sharp. It might look really sharp today, but what it looks like when it's been outside in the elements and you've got the timber contracting and expanding and moving, and there's this composite product doing the same thing, it's unlikely that it'll stay looking as neat as it perhaps does here. So one of the ways of getting around that is using the square edge board that we use for the stair treads and perimeters and picture framing, and cutting these pelmet blocks with it. By screwing them to the face of the deck, you can run your fascia board in, gapping it off of that correctly on both sides. That'll stay looking neat and tidy for the longevity of your project. So a real premium way to finish your deck is to have what was termed as a picture frame going around the outside of your deck. Commonly what people do is bring their fascia board up to cover up the end of the deck board. Okay, whilst it's acceptable to install that way, what you actually create is a gap between the back of the fascia and the end of your deck board for moisture, leaves and garden debris to get stuck into. Also, all of that water is going to track down the back of the fascia board and get between the fascia board and the timber subframe. Over time, as that freezes, you can get problems of expansion, which can cause this fascia board to snake in appearance. So what we're doing on this project, as you can see on here, is we're dropping this fascia board flush with the timber surface, and then we're going to use a square edge board to overhang it. And by overhanging it, we create a nice water runoff, so the water will go down the front of that fascia board, protect the outside rim joist of that timber. So that picture frame will obviously mitre this in, but it's going to run all the way around the decking, same on this face, and that also helps cover up the end profile of our groove deck board. So from the garden aspect, we're seeing a lovely finished edge. When you're planning for your picture frame, obviously the board's running around here and returning around this face. So as we lift that up, we can already see we have all the joist work in place to fasten through the face of this square edge board into joist to ensure we can get that fastened in line with the installation guide. As we change direction around here, we've had to add some extra timbers underneath this taped area to ensure that we've got a solid surface to take those fasteners. So this ensures that we can fasten through this board in line with our installation guide, getting 2 fixings across the width of the board, spaced at 400 centres. So now we're ready to start installing our decking. As you can see, the grooved edge deck board, we have a starter clip that we can screw down to the frame to offer that first groove into the board. That's one method of fixing your groove boards to the frame. Another method is doing a colour match screw through the surface, which we'll cover in just a moment. Let's start with these starter clips. So you can see they're a U-shaped clip with a hole already defined in it to allow us to screw it down to the frame. Before we screw them in, it's advisable to find the right mark, and we can snap a chalk line down. As you can see, we're screwing down through the middle of this hole. As this screw penetrates through the tape, and we get this final tightening down, this compression, it's going to squeeze all of that butyl around that screw hole. So all of that butyl now is flowed back around that screw, giving us a watertight fixing. This will drastically improve the lifespan of your joists. Before we install our boards, there's a couple of things we need to make sure we do. First of all, if you come and look at the end of this board, you'll notice that it isn't particularly square. The end production fibres are just a little bit stretched and a little bit exposed. So we want to cut that away to give a nice clean cut and finish on the edge of the board. To allow you to do this from both ends of the boards, Trex actually oversupplies the product. So this is invoiced as a 4880. So 4.88 metres. You can see that the board is actually 30 mil roughly longer to allow you to cut this end nice and square, and then repeat and cut that on the opposite end and still leave you with the working length that you've paid for. This is the production end of the board, and you can see it's quite furry. And once we clean cut that away, you can see it gives a nice finished clean cut, which is a lot squarer than the production ends that came off the line. So we're now going to start installing our boards. We want to make the deck board look as natural as possible. So some areas of the board like here may not contain a lot of streaking, and some like here are quite heavily streaked. And we do that in a random pattern. So it's really, really important to lay out a batch of maybe 8 or 9 boards and step back and think, do I have much of a repeated pattern that maybe we want to change? I know earlier in the video we talked about clean cutting the edges away. On this project, we're actually going to use a rail saw or a track saw to cut all these back to length. So, but not every installer has one of those. So that's why we showed that earlier of cutting them on the chop saw before you started. So we'll deal with that later on this project. Now this run of starter clips is in, we can pull this over, and as you can see, the starter clip is now going to touch the bottom of that mould. On the opposite side of that, we're going to introduce our other fastener for groove deck boards, which is the universal fastener. So this comes pre-threaded in the box, stainless steel screw into the glass-filled nylon clip. Now this clip's really clever. It has 2 lugs on either side. This does the gapping of your boards for you, so you don't need to put any gapping tools inside to keep the gaps consistent. So as long as this run is completely straight, in theory, providing we put these in nice and square and flush each time, it should help to keep that deck board and those lines nice and straight for you. So how do we install these? We just offer it into the groove. Make sure that this goes in square. We don't want it to kink left or right. We want to hold it in place against that board. In the box you get a fastening piece, And then we pop that into the screw and we just gently screw that into the subframe, making sure it's nice and square. And we don't want to finish that off. We just want to put it in, leaving the screws slightly proud. And we're going to repeat that on every joist down the board. Then we can offer our next board in and repeat that process and come back and tighten this down at that point. If we were to tighten it now, you can see that it would just kink the clip. So that's going to make it really difficult to get your next board in because we've compressed it. Put them in lightly so they've got a little bit of play in them to allow you make it easy for you to get your next board in. So the placement of this first or last clip is really important. It needs to be within 25mm of the end of the board. Now I know this is overlaid here, but we're going to cut this back, and we know that by measuring back, I know the measurement from that edge to here will be 105mm, which means that clip is going to be within 25mm of the end of the board. If that clip isn't in that space and close enough to the end of the board, the ends of those boards can lift up a little bit. Work out where your deck's going to finish once it's cut and make sure that fixing's in the right place. Trex is made from wood and plastic. Now neither product in their virgin state is often straight, and that's a really good example on this next board we're trying to pull in. This end of the board's touching the clip, the opposite end of the board's touching the clip, and we can see we've got a little bit of curvature in the middle of that board. So even though this board has got quite a bit of a curve in it, we can definitely manipulate it and pull it back straight. Just by applying some pressure and pulling it across, it will pull into the clip, no problem at all. You may have to get a couple of clips on a joist, then pull it across and get a couple more in, and work your way down the board from one end to the other to keep it nice and straight. So if you've got a really badly curved board, things like deck clamps or using some normal clamps of some description can help pull this in. So just by applying some pressure onto these clamps, you can see we've taken that curvature out of the board. It's now touching the clips all the way down and it's nice and straight. As we've done that, go back to the previous one. We can now tighten that all the way down into the clip. Fix the next joist, tighten that down evenly, and that'll pull the deck down nice and even. So now we've got to deal with a board that's what we call ski tipped up on the end. They definitely don't come out the factory looking like this, but it can be an issue if boards aren't stored on site correctly. But just by applying some pressure, we can get that down nice and flat. As we touched on earlier, when you're laying out your joists, to have your last joist, remember these boards are going to be cut back to be sitting here, your first joist at 250 and your next joist at 400. Providing you've got that, we can pull this board over and then we can fasten it down. Sometimes on a deck, you might need to use what's called a butt joint. So if the cut from one end is starting the run of the next boards, i.e. like how you would lay out a laminate floor. So we thought we'd just demo that and show you how you must do that in line with our installation guide. So you can see a few things are happening and going on here. We've got two joists and we've put a clear space between these two joists to allow for any water and airflow to go down below. So now when we bring that board into fix it, we've got a couple of things that are going on. The end of our board is going to land on its own independent joist. And then the first joist back is still at that 250 mark. So we've had to put some extra timbers in because there was our normal subframe 400 apart, the same here 400 apart. We've had to put some extra joists in to take care of the fasteners to do this joint correctly. The most common mistake that we see happen when people do these joints is normally they just join them like that over one joist. That is not in line with our installation guide and will cause issues going forward. So each board must land on its own independent joist like so. We must have a 3 to 5mm gap in between those boards. So the boards land on our own joists. We have a sister joist 250 back. We have a 3 to 5mm gap. And then this allows us to get 4 fasteners around this joint, around this fixing point. So as we screw it down, as you can see now, we've consistently got that 3mm gap in between. All the right fasteners are around the joint. And we have our sister joist back here at 250 on both sides of the joint. It's much easier to work in full lengths and use picture frames and breaker boards to keep things in a panel system. But if you have to do a joint, that is the only way to do it and stay in line with our installation guide. On the first edge of the deck, we showed you how to use the starter clips to set that first groove. There is another way that we can fix it, and by fixing through the surface of the board. So we have a couple of options. We have a colour match screw. Again, we showed this when we were doing the fascias, slightly different head on it, a thinner gauge screw, but it's colour matched, and it as a manufactured by Trex, for Trex, they're an exact rail colour match to the deck board itself. So we need to be 25mm from the edge and 25mm from the end. And we want to finish that flush with the surface of the board, and it leaves a nice colour match fastener in there. If you did want to see that screw head and you wanted to plug that, we introduced the Enhance plug cutter. So again, it's a boring tool, cuts the hole and then creates a shoulder. And we've made a mark 25mm in from the edge in the centre of the joist. We bore that away, creating that nice finish there. We then take the Enhanced screw, which has got this pan head and no thread at the top of the shank. We drop that into the hole. We're going to use this Enhanced depth setter tool. This has got a clever little bit of EDM on the top. So as we drive it in and get to the required depth, we won't mark the top of our deck board. See how it just squashes and allows us to get it down to the right depth. Now that deck board is completely secured in place. Lastly, we're going to take our plugs. Again, manufactured by Trex, so it's exactly the same shell product as the surface of the deck board. We find the one that matches, we tap that away, it just gives that lovely finish. All our groove boards are fixed, so we're now going to get on to fixing our outer picture frame. So we're going to use some colour match plugs for this, matched to the Biscayne range. So we're going to take our black composite screws, and we're going to use our decking depth setter tool. So remember, 25mm from all edges. We're going to get our first screw and we're going to use this clip to gap this correctly. So 3 to 5mm gap off the ends of the boards. So the decking clip is actually, as we know, a 5mm shoulder. So come in handy to help you gap that and keep all of your gaps correct and consistent. Now on a mitre, to keep it looking good, understanding that the timber joist is running down here. So if we went 25mm from this edge, we're actually going to go into the fascia board. So we want to bring this back to make sure we hit the timber. So we're in the middle of that timber joist. Screw that in. So we're going to make a triangle of fixings, 25mm in from that edge. Drive that down. So now we've got those 3 fixings around the mitre. That'll help keep everything staying straight for longer. Using the plugs helps to hide the screws. We need to keep those 2 fasteners across the face all the way down the board gapped no more than 400. So there's the middle of those plugs that we've tapped in. So that's going to bring our next fixing point to around about there. 25mm in from the edge again, making sure we're tight against that spotter. Putting that fastener in. And we're going to repeat that process all the way down this board, making sure we've got 2 across the face and that spacing of no more than 400 between those 2 fasteners.